Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are here to provide our reactions to NXT Heatwave, which took place last night, August 24th, in Lowell, Massachusetts. So, as predicted, the opening matchup was the triple threat match to determine the new number one contender for the NXT Women's Championship. And this one was surprisingly personal, with all three women really kind of obviously wanting the number one contender spot, but it looked like, there was a lot of bitterness between the three. And then we kind of teased that up, weeks prior, that none of these individuals were intimidated by the other. But yeah, this was hard hitting and felt pretty personal throughout the match. At least to me, that's how I felt. So the announcers talked a bit about Kelani and how she was the only one to not have challenged for that NXT Women's Championship, which is true, but also you have to feel a bit bad for her. She always feels like she's right around that particular spot, but not quite there yet. And then her family was at ringside as well, so had me thinking, well, this was definitely going to be your night. You see your family out there, something big usually going to happen, albeit sometimes not positive, but regardless, thought maybe that was a bit there to kind of foreshadow what was coming. But that obviously was not the case. Also wanted to mention that Miss Parker was one of the most over women of the evening, and 3 or 4 times I think we got a Miss Parker chant throughout the night or throughout the match, so definitely worth noting there. The ending, however, came from Kelani trying to hit that 450. It was a bit short. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but then that was reversed by Lola. A couple of reversals later, Jaida then comes in and hits Kelani. I think she was intended, which was intended for Lola, but does end up taking out Kelani, and then Jaida trying to pick up on what happened, and then she gets rolled for the 1-2-3 pin by Lola Vice. Lola Vice is your new number one contender for the NXT Women's Championship. So you all know I'm not a huge fan of the roll-ups, but I think this one's okay because it does a nice it does a few things nice. One of those being, I think with that ending, I think Kelani and Jaida can kind of continue their rivalry. I hit on that a bit in the predictions video. I think if, both KP and I had Lola winning, and I think the best objective here would be to have Kelani and Jaida kind of finish that rivalry that they never really did. So I think that works there. I think the roll-up keeps everyone safe. And obviously that's always the intention. But in this instance, when you have three women who are, seemingly all equally as deserving, I think that works here. And yeah, I think Lola, as has been, mentioned in the predictions video, has been, flirting with getting back to that main event scene, and ever since teaming with Vaquer has certainly been doing all the right things. So Vaquer and Jacy Jayne was announced that will take place at No Mercy, one of the couple new PLEs announced throughout the evening. So as far as ratings for this one go, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. I felt like these three women have really good chemistry, obviously, as they should at this point. But yeah, 7.5 out of 10, and a great way to start this NXT PLE. Getting into the next match, we have Darkstate's Dion Lennox and Osiris Griffin taking on Hank and Tank for those NXT Tag Team Championships. And up until the actual bell rang, Darkstate did a great job of misleading Hank and Tank, as all four men came to the ring dressed for in-ring action. This was something different, and I liked it quite a bit. Up until the bell rings, you are keeping, and you could argue a bit after, Hank and Tank finally realizing who's actually, who they're actually going up against. And we talked about that on the predictions video, how that could potentially come into play. And I would argue it certainly did, in more ways than one. The four members of Darkstate getting into Hank and Take's head. Speaking of Darkstate, as would be expected, they very much had the advantage, as mentioned throughout the match. They were always going to have the numbers game and that advantage that comes with it, unless someone, Hank and Tank had, prepared for that, which you could argue maybe they could have, to kind of help even the odds, but they didn't. And they are constantly getting the better of Hank and Tank throughout this match, and Hank and Tank did their best to overcome the odds, and it did feel like there were a couple instances of them doing just that, and maybe finally finding a way to retain, but in the end, they just couldn't do it, unfortunately. And they eat a Doomsday device, and Darkstate finally gets their first taste of gold on NXT as your new NXT Tag Team Champions. So, yeah, I've been mentioning for a while, I think, and I think we both kind of hit on this before. If you're going to be a legitimate team and or faction, that you eventually have to win some gold to make it, make yourself a viable contender. And kind of the same we said with Wyatt Six for a while there. And they eventually got their gold and still have it now. So it's kind of the same thing with Darkstate. They'd been causing chaos, just couldn't figure out where they were going to go, who they were going to go after, and they finally, decided on these tag team championships. And I think that's a great way to start. I think they have some pretty good in-ring chemistry, and I think all four members kind of bring something special. So it is kind of not standard. Maybe it'll happen, naturally, but it doesn't feel like there is one person. If you were to be asked who is the leader of Darkstate, it doesn't feel like there's one person that sticks out, who's in charge. And I think that's I think that's new, and I think that's something different, and I like it. It's something that keeps this team interesting. I feel like all four of them could be led, could lead in one way or another. But for now, I don't, at least to me, I haven't seen a clear one. So, this was a great match, and I give this one a 7 out of 10. The next match is our second triple threat match of the night, and has Ash by Elegance going up against Masha, Slamovich, and Jacy Jayne for that TNA Knockouts Championship. This one was a bit chaotic. Both, obviously, Fatal Influence and the Elegance brand get involved here, which I think is to be expected, up until Jasmine Nix is caught hitting Ash. And then Fatal Influence, the other two members, are ejected from ringside by the rep, which was interesting. As to remove just Fatal Influence and not both teams. I don't recall a ton of activity from the Elegance brand before that, but also I do think standard. Typically that these triple threat matches for the title are no DQ. So I guess, and I think the commentary team did kind of hit on that, is that it's, the referee's discretion. And so I guess the ref just felt like that was enough. But clearly, kayfabe, you can see where they're going with this. Jacy not going to be happy, and we saw an interview with her as well later in the evening, with Jasmine costing her one of her two titles. So, yeah, take that what you will, but the ending comes obviously back to bite them as Jacy hits a rolling encore on Masha and appears to maybe be about to win, retain her title, and then she's pulled off by the Elegance brand, and then Ash comes in to cover and win, and is your new TNA Knockouts champion. So, the irony is certainly there. Jacy losing one of her titles, essentially the same way she's been able to retain them here or there, with her team helping her get the win. So, the end scene here is the Elegance brand is draped in gold. So I certainly did not call that one. I did think Jacy was going to lose her title, but I I thought it was to Masha. So regardless, this was nice and an unexpected surprise, and certainly nice to see formerly known as Dana Brooke doing well outside of WWE. But in terms of the match and the rating here, this one didn't quite live up to what I had been expecting, both from Masha and Jacy. Everything I've seen them two in have been really good. And so this one felt like a step back for them. Obviously, these three women aren't going to have as much chemistry. And you know, naturally, we're going to compare this one to the opening triple threat match, and they're going to have better chemistry. So I think that probably alluded to my rating kind of coming down a bit, but I still gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. So not a bad match by any means, just not as good. Getting into our next match, we have Jordynne Grace going up against Blake Monroe. As expected, this one was very personal. Both women really brought their A game for this one. Blake was really targeting Jordynne's arm for the most part, and Grace continued to power through that, persevere. At one point, Blake grabbed a bottom turnbuckle and it was ripped off, as these things tend to go. This one comes back to help decide the finish when Jordynne ends up getting slammed into the exposed turnbuckle. This was allowing Blake to get the win here, and what I call match of the night up until this point. This one was really personal, and you could tell, and I think the expectations were certainly there. And then for me, this one definitely lived up to it so far. I think this is a great way, as far as the ending goes, Blake getting the win here. I think it's a great way to keep Jordynne protected in kind of a sheepish win, and possibly, hopefully, continue the feud. Neither woman really looked weak here to me, and this one basically lived up to my expectations. Like I said, I don't think the feud is quite over, though, or at least it wouldn't make a ton of sense for it to be. I'm hopeful that this loss will kind of eat at Jordynne, and she'll begin to show a more vicious side. You know, she can't be happy with having lost. You know, Jordynne basically been bullying her up until this point. She can't have been happy to eat a loss here after all of that. And so, like I said, I'm hopeful this brings out a more vicious side of Jordynne. I'm not saying a full-on heel turn, although I think I made it clear that I would love that. But with all that power Jordynne possesses, it just doesn't feel right to let someone like Blake continue to bully her as much as she had. So I think these two have some excellent chemistry, though, and I think another PLE match or two could be quite the spectacle. So like I said, I'm hopeful this one continues. And I imagine it will. But for now, I give this match an 8 out of 10. I thought this one was a lot of fun. Getting into our penultimate match of the night, we have Tavion Heights and Tyra May Steele, Team USA, if you will, going up against Chelsea Green and Ethan Page, Team Canada. The dynamic of this match was all sorts of backwards, and honestly, that makes sense. You know, Ethan and especially Chelsea Green right now are just way too good, and they're not going to be naturally disliked by the crowd, no matter how hard they try. Ethan, I think, has a little better time, especially in NXT, of being liked or disliked, but Chelsea Green, yeah, not a shot. They just need to accept the fact that she's more of a face right now. That's just how she is. Tavion and Tyra, they're just very confident and fiery. And that's your standard babyface energy, of course, but that's hard to get behind, especially when you're going up against two guys who are supposed to be heels, but clearly are not disliked by the fans. Tyra especially, super confident, and that just doesn't really come across as babyface energy. But yeah, like I think I said it in the predictions video as well. I think if the dynamics were reversed, I think this would have made for a much better contest. But regardless, I did think this was a good contest and a good match. And obviously the Secret Harvest paying off and allowing Chelsea to get the win, landing that on Prettier. So that was a surprise to me. I did not see, but If that was the planned outcome, great. But based on the crowd energy, I think that could have possibly been an audible because of how over Team Canada was, even in their matching uniform, matching attires. I thought that was a nice touch as well. But yeah, I did not see the bad guys, quote unquote, winning here. So and I will state, I think Chelsea was the most over person of the night. So yeah, like I said, KP and I both had the bad guys losing here, but absolutely no complaints from me, and I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. Getting into the main event, we have Javon Evans taking on Femi for that NXT championship. And for me, this one absolutely lived up to the slot as the main event. Javon clearly battling those injuries. He suffered from that Philadelphia street fight just this last Tuesday. But as we mentioned on the predictions video, if anyone could battle through, said adversity and pull off that ultimate babyface underdog win, it is the young OG. The ending of this one got a little dicey as the ref gets taken out, and then of course Javon lands a couple of cutters, but the ref is out, right? We've seen that way too many times. Get the 3 count, but there's no ref in there. Well, another ref was clearly waiting by and comes in and actually counts to 3. He actually hits the mat 3 times, counts to 3, but the original ref is up in time and waves off the 3 count and then says Oba's foot was under the ropes. The crowd was not happy about this at all, and rightfully so. I don't love that rule. I think Oba was probably better served had he just put his foot on the ropes. And I just don't love that. But regardless, the outcome is the same, and I think obviously this is going to continue to build that babyface crowd reaction behind Javon, because now he can say, he basically beat Oba. So take that for what it's worth. It wasn't long after this, Javon gets tossed from the ring through the announce table, brutal spot, and Oba then takes care of the young OG, and the rest is kind of history, and Oba Femi is still your NXT champion. So the question gets asked, will Oba ever lose that title? Just maybe. But this was a great contest. I thought this was the best match of the night. And rightfully put in that main event spot. I feel like a lot of times we like to put another match over that probably should have been the main event, but for this PLE and Heatwave, felt like it was rightly placed on the card. So with that, this has been the NXT Heatwave reactions video, and overall, I feel like this was a bigger card than the typical PLE gives us, especially under the current era. It's 6 matches. This was a huge card, comparatively speaking, and because of that, I think a few of these matches kind of suffered from, I think they were pinched for time, or at least they thought they were. And obviously, I don't know the inner workings of WWE, but it felt like a few of these matches could have used more time. And I'm assuming because they had 6 matches on the card, they were worried about how long this PLE could go. It just clocked in at just over 2 hours with actual, PLE time. So I'm not sure. Well, I think they could have given those matches a few at least 5 more minutes here or there. I think 2.5 hours could have been perfectly acceptable, and kind of equally distribute that, or distribute it, however they feel they need to. Those matches I'm referring to, the women's number 1 contenders match, I felt like that was the least of the ones affected, but I felt like even had you given that one 5 more minutes, that maybe we could have, gone without the roll-up finish, and or just had a few more spots. More specifically, though, I think the mixed tag team match definitely could have used some more time. The crowd was really hot for that one, so I think that one could have used a bit more time. And the TNA Knockouts title match, I thought could have used a bit more time, maybe as well. I know I'm nitpicking here, but it just felt strange because of how big the card was, how short the PLA ended up being. Just felt like there was it just didn't make sense the way that went. It was one of the shorter PLEs that I can recall. But other than that, I felt like Heatwave did provide a nice variety, and overall was very entertaining. So it just didn't have that match that I think leaves me thinking I'm going to come back and watch this for years to come. So I think that was the one kind of caveat, other than the time kind of weirdness of the time, I guess. But yeah, lots of talking points coming from this event, and very much looking forward to the next episode of NXT. Have lots to discuss on that one already, and we have down our women's champion. Our next women's champion, number one contender, is Lola, and then Sol Ruka, we found out throughout the night, will be defending her speed title. With a possible AAA, SmackDown, Raw, and NXT member, so that could be interesting. And then after the match, the main event, we see Ricky Saints come up, and he appears to be the next challenger for Oba Femi. So that should be a good contest as well. And yeah, with that, that has been our Heatwave reactions video all done. And if you like what we're putting out here, agree with us, disagree with us, please let us know in the comments below. Of course, we'd love a subscribe and a like as well. And yeah, I think it's a pretty good PLE all in all, and I think a couple new NXT PLEs announced. No Mercy and Halloween Havoc over the next 2 months, basically. So if this PLE didn't quite scratch that itch for you, don't have to wait too long. And of course, we have Clash in Paris coming up next weekend as well. So with that, this has been The Push with Nick and KP, and until next time, we'll see you then. Take care.